Well, we're under 100 days until the midterms.
Oh.
96 is the current number until the midterm election. We set the table with primary election results from both Kansas and Missouri, plus a whole plate full of news of the day, the good, the bad, and the ironic. We're going to cover it all on this week's episode of Dale Carter's America.
From the heart of flyover country, he's not on the far right, and he's certainly not on the far left. Like you, he's somewhere in the middle. This is Dale Carter's America.
Well, I mean, the first headline that I really want to talk about, Dale Carter, by the way, with Kurt Wheeler. I'm back from Montana and Wyoming. Not only did I not get eaten by a bear, I did not see a bear.
I know. I heard that.
Yeah.
Were you expecting to see a bear?
I was. I mean, my wife goes out there every year, and she said this is the first time she's ever been out there where she didn't see at least one bear.
Oh, really?
So they must have gotten the memo.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of bears out there because bears are very elusive typically. Yeah. So, but I guess if there's a lot, and they don't have people to be afraid of, then,
I took a lot of pictures, too, and the pictures, I mean, it's just beautiful. I mean, when you got a beautiful backdrop like that, you can't go wrong.
Right.
Especially with the Grand Tetons and Yellowstone. I mean, it was really a fascinating trip. I'd never been out there before, but I think I'll go back.
Was Yellowstone crowded? Was there a lot of people there?
There were a lot of people there. And not only that, they've got a lot of construction going on. They had flooding on the north side, so you cannot get into Yellowstone from the north side. It may be years before they fix that.
Wow.
And the south side, they had a lot of places down to one lane, so traffic is a nightmare at Yellowstone.
Yeah, it's happening with a lot of the national parks. I know Zion is another big one in Utah that I've been to a couple times where it's just like the traffic there is just ridiculous. I mean, the foot traffic going on the trails, you have to get permits now to go on certain trails because there's so many people there. So, I mean, it's cool that we have those preserved natural spaces, but it sucks that they're getting so busy.
Yeah. Well, we got to stop talking about it. You got to stop talking about it. My wife's got to stop talking about it. She's like the Chamber of Commerce, and she's complaining that Jackson Hole is so crowded.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, then stop talking about it.
Right.
Make it a big secret again. I guess it was no secret where al-Zawahiri was living in Afghanistan. He moved back into Afghanistan just sitting in a house, and the CIA took him out with a drone strike.
Yep, I saw that.
So, we make fun of Joe Biden a lot on this podcast because he deserves it. But we give him credit where credit is due. He famously counseled Barack Obama not to take the shot on Osama bin Laden. He brags about that. Yeah. I was the only one in the room that told him not to take the shot. Really?
I mean, do you think he really deserves credit for this, though? Like, do you think he was the guy, like, he's in the situation room? Like,
I think he was.
We're going to take the shot.
Yeah, there were pictures of him in the situation room, and I do give him credit because at a situation like that, the president is asked go or no go.
Sure.
He has to give the green light.
Right.
So he gets the credit. He gets the blame if it goes wrong. I mean, if the drone takes out half a block and you've got a school in there and a church, I mean, he gets the blame for that. So I think he gets the credit for it. There's plenty of stuff that we can hang on him, that's not so good. Before we get to anything else on him, how about Pelosi in Taiwan? What the hell?
Yeah, I saw the headlines about this, but can you kind of fill me in on what's going on? Because
I have no idea. She, I guess, got a wild hair and said she was going to do like a Far East jaunt, right? First question is why? I think cynically, I know the answer to why. Okay, because she's got to know at her gut level that she's not going to be the Speaker of the House much longer.
Yeah.
So, and if she's going to be a backbench Democrat, I mean, is she going to be minority leader of the new House? Is that what she wants to do?
Maybe she's meeting with her husband's hedge fund partners.
See, that's my cynical thing. It's like she's probably feathering her own nest. I mean, they said that no one this high level has been to Taiwan in 25 years. So why now does Nancy Pelosi think she needs to go to Taiwan?
That's a great question. I mean, in a sense, we do want to support Taiwan, and it's a very tricky situation because China doesn't recognize Taiwan, obviously, as its own country, and we should recognize them as its own country, but we don't want to create this, global conflict or whatever. So I don't know. Who knows? I would just like to know why she's there in the first place. But.
Well, and as we're recording the podcast, I guess we'll know later. Her husband is kind of facing the music in court with his DUI that caused an injury. If you or I went through that, there'd probably be jail time involved because his last name is Pelosi.
Right.
Maybe he gets off with a slap on the wrist. I don't know.
Probably. Yeah, probably. I mean, I would be very surprised if he faces any jail time, certainly. But
well, he hurt somebody, right? Could have killed somebody.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying that because he's Pelosi, Pelosi's husband, he's held to a different standard. That's how it works.
The Inflation Reduction Act. I love you're a big one on language, right? That they own the language.
Yep.
So they've passed something with Manchin now on board. I mean, any respect I had for Joe Manchin, that just flew out the window.
Yeah.
I mean, so they're calling it the Inflation Reduction Act, and the highlights of it are they're going to raise taxes, and they're going to spend a lot of money. Spending a lot of government money has gotten us where we are with 9% inflation, so let's just spend some more.
Yeah. It's, speaking of the language, I mean, we've talked about this before, but you can almost count on whatever the name of the bill is being the opposite of what it actually is going to do. They have the Green New Deal and, the Affordable Health Care Act, and now the Inflation Reduction Act. It's all just it's manipulation to try and get people to think that it's something that it's not. It's obviously not going to decrease inflation. I mean, you're talking about more spending, more taxing, just going more and harder in the same direction that's gotten us into this mess in the first place.
Well, they haven't had the vote yet, and there are some questions out there. Where's Sinema on this? Because she said she would never want to raise taxes in this environment, which is the smart play. They've got to have all 50 Democrats, and they've all got to be breathing, and they've all got to be in the chamber.
Right.
And they haven't managed to do that in months.
Yeah.
Somebody's been out with a surgery. Somebody's been out here or there. One guy had a stroke, but I think he's back. I mean, it's going to need to be a Weekend at Bernie's moment. They're going to have to wheel some people in, maybe with oxygen tents. I don't know.
Yeah.
The guy from Vermont, I mean, I don't even know how he's breathing. He looks like a cadaver. So they're going to have to do that in order to pull this off.
Yeah. Well, that just goes back to, we need fresh people in Congress. I mean, I think the average age of the Senate's probably like 82 or something.
That sounds about right. So, we'll see what happens with that, but I just find it ironic that they threw Manchin a bone. He got something out of this. I think he got a pipeline for West Virginia or something like that, but they threw him a bone.
It's just all so corrupt, man. It's so corrupt, all the backdoor dealings, all the, the shady stuff. I mean, there was another one, Jon Stewart, the late night talk show host, he was campaigning for this veterans bill or something like that. And now Jon Stewart's out there, LARPing as a blue collar guy. He wears like, a t-shirt with blue jeans and boots, pretends like he's one of us. And, but they try to cram a bunch of stuff into it last minute, like a bunch of extra spending on random crap. And that's how it always works. I mean, that's how I'm sure it worked with this inflation bill. I mean, you said it still hasn't been voted on yet, but they always put extra stuff in there. They make it 2,000 pages so nobody can read it, and then they pass it, in the middle of the night, and nobody talks about it anymore.
Well, keep your eye on it, and especially, like you said, it's opposite day, so inflation will probably go up. I am so glad that, just as a personal matter for me, I bought some I-bonds. Are you familiar with I-bonds? Have we talked about this before?
No.
They're bonds sold by the Treasury Department, and they're called I-bonds because they're based on the rate of inflation.
Oh.
So I locked in a rate for some money that was sitting on the sideline at 9.2%.
Wow.
I mean, you're not getting anything at the bank, right?
No.
I'm getting like 0.000. And so I parked some money with the federal government, I-bonds, and I'm getting a 9.5% return.
And that rate is locked in even if inflation goes down, or does it follow inflation?
It's locked in through October, as I understand it. Check it out, though. You can Google it, go online or whatever. You can only buy them through the Treasury Department.
Uh-huh.
You can't buy them at the bank, can't buy them from your broker or whatever. And it's an onerous task to set up your own account. I did it. It took me like a day and a half.
Yeah.
But I got my account set up because it's the government. They make everything so easy.
Right.
So I got my account set up, and you got to park it there for a while. And I think the penalty is if you pull it out too early, you lose the last 3 months of interest. I know you were about to giggle like a 12-year-old because I said pull it out prematurely.
I really wasn't actually, but now that you mentioned it,
I saw that smirk. I thought you were kind of going there. Okay. So anyway, I-bonds, check that out. I think they're with everything that's going on here, if you've got some money on the sidelines, that's a place that you ought to put it. Recession redefined. These guys, Kurt, I'm telling you, anytime they come up against, bump up against reality, They just redefine it.
Yep.
Okay. So when in doubt on anything, you cite unnamed scientists and or economists, because now they're saying that what we have lived with for 100 years, that a recession is defined by 2 negative quarters of growth, which we just posted, that no longer means recession, because economists say that. I mean, they all agree.
And it's been literally some of the same people, too. It's not even like it's the government that has broadly shifted the definition, which has happened, but it's been some of literally the same people. You can go and look back 5, 8, 10 years ago at them saying a recession is 2 quarters of back-to-back, loss in economic growth. Right. And then now they flip the switch and,
2 negative quarters of GDP growth is not the technical definition of recession. It's not the definition that economists have traditionally relied on.
And now it's more complicated.
Yeah,
than that.
It's more complicated.
And, and this mouthpiece they have going into the briefing room every day, she is just abysmal.
Yeah.
I mean, at least Jen Psaki. Jen Psaki was a nasty woman.
Yeah.
But that's a Trump term, a nasty woman. Yeah. But, at least she made some sense, right? She could spin it.
Right.
This girl's got deer in the headlights, man.
Right.
And she's like, well, all of the economists agree.
That is not the definition.
Brian Deese said in 2008, of course, economists have a technical definition, which is of a recession, which is 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth.
I can tell you this.
Yesterday he said 2 negative quarters of GDP growth is not the technical definition of a recession.
It is
what
not.
changed?
It is not.
Why did he say that
it
was?
Is not. I can
What's the difference other than who
I can speak to what he said yesterday in front of all of you, which is the last thing that you just repeated. There are many factors, economic factors and indicators to consider, and I will say that the textbook definition of recession is not 2 negative quarters of GDP.
Yeah.
Laureates. I think that's a term
that
Biden throws
laureates,
around.
Yeah. He knows 11 Nobel laureates, and they all agree with everything that he says.
Some days they're scientists, some days they're economists.
Right.
And this week, recession has been redefined, at least according to them. We know we're living through it right now.
I mean, again, it's just manipulation of language to match the narrative. I mean, they've changed the definition of recession, democracy, woman. I mean, like just the most basic things that you can possibly imagine, because it's all the ends justify the means, and they'll change whatever meanings of words they need to get to hit the goal.
Okay, well, here's another issue on words and what they mean and all that, because they're out there with the climate change thing and global warming. Global warming wasn't working because it didn't fit the narrative a couple of times, so they've changed it, broadened it to climate change. And where they'll change the definition of it is, it's August in Kansas City and August everywhere, obviously. And it's really hot.
Yeah.
Right? Well, it's always hot in Kansas City in August. That's just the weather, Kurt. That's weather. That's not climate.
Right.
Okay. So if it's really hot in the winter, you have a really warm day in the winter, that's their definition of climate change.
Right.
If it's really, really cold, for instance, in the middle of summer, if that happens, that's climate change. But anything that's normal is, well, that's the weather. That's not the climate.
Right. And it's amazing the level of importance these people give themselves. I mean, Kamala Harris, just the other day, we had flooding in St. Louis last week, and then it was really bad in Kentucky. I think a few people died. I don't know how many, but there was,
I think it was like 26 last count.
Yeah. Very unfortunate. There was some really bad flooding in Kentucky. And Kamala Harris goes in some presser or something like that, and she's talking about, I'll try and find the clip, but she's talking about how, we could have stopped this.
For years, our nation and many of us have discussed, have lamented, have talked about the threat of climate change. For years, we debated the potential impact that climate change could have on our communities, on our country, and our world. And today, we know the impact, if folks weren't clear about it before. Just watch the evening news and see that the time for debate is long past. Climate change has become a climate crisis, and a threat has now become a reality. In recent days, Deadly floods have swept through Missouri and Kentucky, washing away entire neighborhoods, leaving at least 35 dead, including babies, children. As has been reported, 4 children from one family. So the devastation is real. The harm is real. The impact is real. And we are witnessing it in real time.
Like, what are you talking about? No. Some policy from the government is going to stop the rain from coming down? It's going to stop floods from happening? Like, what kind of power do you think we have? Who do you think we are? Are you doing like a magic rain dance or something? Like, how are you stopping, rain? It's just ridiculous.
These are the same people who think they can pass a 16,000th gun bill
right.
and that will stop the violence in our cities.
Right.
That's the arrogance. And they have a lot of arrogance. But, out west, I was in Montana and Wyoming. Mm-hmm. I stayed at my friend Steve's cabin in Montana. They don't have central air, okay? We rented a condo in Teton Village, just outside Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and it did not have central air. So I'm going to tell you that I believe the planet is warming. Mm-hmm. It's a 5 billion-year-old planet, mm-hmm. and there's constant change going on. So it is probably warming. But I see this as an opportunity for people who sell heating and air conditioning. Central air needs to come to Montana and Wyoming, places that it's never been before. When I moved to Connecticut, in 1992, they didn't have central air there.
Right.
I found the only condo I could find in Waterbury, Connecticut that had central air because being from southern Indiana, which is the same climate we have in Kansas City, I was expecting hot, sultry, steamy weather in the summer, and they weren't used to that in New England. So I think it is happening. Here's the arrogance, Kurt. The arrogance is the left thinks that there's this Goldilocks hole that they can hold us in. Okay, if we just do this, we're going to hold right where we are.
Yep.
Never mind the fact that the planet's 5 billion years old. Human life is it's like a grain of salt in the history of this planet. So here's what I'm going to assert. Humans are either going to evolve and adapt to what's happening on this planet right now, or we'll get shaken off just like everything else has been shaken off.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest part of what you're pointing to is just the lack of nuance in their argument, and the, like I mentioned with Kamala, it's like this idea that all we have to do is pass some policy and the policies themselves are not going to work. It's all, cap and trade. It's punishing American energy, despite the fact that we produce energy cleaner than almost anybody else. And this idea that the government or policy can control what's going to happen with the weather, like immediately. It's like, oh, well, if we had just passed that Green New Deal, that rainstorm wouldn't have happened and we wouldn't have had that flooding in Kentucky. It's so ridiculous. And anyone with any sense of common sense, we can disagree about climate change. Maybe someone thinks that it's a bigger problem than you and I do. And we can talk about that. And there's some nuance there. We can talk about, what energy policy is the best, how we could save energy, how we can, work on conservation. I mean, that's something that we don't talk about. Conservatives are huge on conservation because we're the ones outside, tend to be at least, conservatives are more into hunting, fishing, camping, things like that, just by statistics. But to think that some magic, flipping of the switch and passing a Democrat bill is going to stop the weather from being bad is just, it's insane.
Well, and then there's the hypocrisy of it. There was a list this week of like all these celebrities who were taking like 7-minute flights to get across town and the CO2 that they're putting out.
Right.
But they tell you, you're the problem. You get on a plane,
or
you're
Pelosi
the problem.
going to Taiwan for that matter.
Exactly. And John Kerry, who's the climate czar. It's my favorite clip. I think we've used it at least once on the podcast, where he goes, "Well, I'm kind of an important person, and I need to get over here, and I need to be at this meeting."
On that issue, pollution, I understand that you came here with a private jet. Is that an environmental way to travel?
If you offset your carbon, it's the only choice for somebody like me who is traveling the world to win this battle. I negotiated the Paris Accords for the United States. I've been involved in this fight for years. I negotiated with President Xi to bring President Xi to the table so we could get Paris. And I believe the time it takes me to get somewhere. I can't sail across the ocean. I have to fly to meet with people and get things done. But what I'm doing almost full time is working to win the battle of climate change. And in the end, if I offset and contribute my life to do this, I'm not going to be put on the defensive.
I mean, my God, if COVID taught us nothing else, it taught us what a Zoom call is.
Right.
Why the hell does he need to go anywhere?
Yeah.
He should be holed up in the basement. No carbon footprint. I'm going to Zoom call with everybody I need to talk to.
Well, another thing that COVID taught us, we're going off on a tangent here, but it's a very good tangent. Another thing that COVID taught us is that there are different sets of rules for different people. That there are different sets of rules for the elites and for us, the average American. We have to lock it in our house. We have to lose our jobs. We have to suffer the consequences of what they tell us to do, and they don't. They can still do whatever they want. They keep their businesses open. They keep making money. They keep giving speaking tours.
Right. They
keep flying overseas and spreading CO2, but we're the ones who have to do something about it, or change the way that we live to fit their narrative. So that's how it's always been. It's just been made more clear than ever.
I don't know how your parents were, but my parents were like, don't smoke, as they lit up another cigarette. Don't drink, as they took a shot of tequila. I mean, do as I say, not as I do will not work. And here's the other thing. Wrecking our economy to pass some Green New Deal and all that, at the same time that India is doing what India is doing, China is doing what China is doing, Russia is doing what they're doing, Germany's now rebuilding coal-fired plants because they realize this doesn't work. Okay, so if all of those countries, especially the ones that have more than 1 billion people, if they're polluting this planet, it's global.
Right.
Which means that air gets over here.
Right.
So it makes no sense.
Yeah.
And again,
we just need to build the wall, but then extend the wall all the way up through the atmosphere and then make a bubble out of it and
do
down
a bubble. I like that. Okay.
This way nobody can fly in or cross the border.
There was a TV series built on that where like some transparent bubble came down over a town. Do you remember that? Under the dome, I think is what it was called.
Okay.
And when they figured out it had happened, there was like a plane flying and it hit this dome and like crashed.
Oh.
Way off on a tangent. Monkeypox and COVID cases. The numbers are going up. And I have a prediction for you. We make a lot of predictions on the podcast. I think the peak of these two things will happen in about 90 days.
Yep.
That's when they'll peak. In case you're not following along, 96 days until the midterm election. So we'll see what happens there. A Pharaoh update. Of course, the Pharaoh, Quentin Lucas I of Kansas City. While I was out of town, I follow the news here in Kansas City. And, of course, there was a lot of gun violence the weekend that we were gone. There were 5 murders in Kansas City the first weekend that we were gone. And then there was a headline that Quentin Lucas was named the National Gun Sense Lawmaker of the Year by Everytown for gun safety.
Yep.
Quentin Lucas gets the big award.
I guess you didn't watch my podcast last week because I talked all about it.
All right. Well, you're right. Okay, you busted me because I was on vacation.
Yeah.
All right.
No. But let's touch on it again since you're here. I mean, and it's funny too because he just posted the other day on his page. It was like 2 days ago or something, and I commented because he posted something about how black people are more prone to gun violence in Missouri, like so much more percent than the national average. And I was like, wait a second, didn't you just get an award from Everytown for gun safety?
Well, he's right about that. The question is why? Why do you think that is the case?
Why
are black men shooting other black men?
Well, that's a deeper question. I mean, I think it's a cultural problem. I think it's a family problem. There's no fathers in the house. I mean, another thing that I did this week, we recorded with Johnny on Sunday and put that up on YouTube. And the things that you hear from people, we were at 35th and Prospect, and there's people talking about this lady's standing at a bus stop, and she points across the street and she says, my stepson was killed right there, shot. And it's crazy. So that's a whole another thing. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that.
Well, we'll get into that with the whole election thing because I have some thoughts, especially on the 5th District of Missouri coming up. But I want to end the session on the Pharaoh. I had a little dust up with him. I don't know if you talked about this or not, and I don't think we've done a podcast episode since this. Pulled over somebody with an expired tag, and the thug got out of the car and thought it'd be a good idea to put 5 bullets in Officer Vasquez. He died. Very sad. They had a funeral while I was out of town in North Kansas City, and Quentin Lucas put up this thing on Twitter, I guess, with his thoughts and prayers.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it's not Kansas City; it's North Kansas City.
Right.
And I don't know. Sometimes you just snap, right?
Yeah.
And so I put something up on our podcast page, and I said, basically, keep your thoughts and prayers, because you're running a war zone in Kansas City. It's drifting out into the suburbs, and you're part of the problem.
Yep.
And did you see the blowback I got on that?
Yeah. All of his
oh my gosh, his minions were all over me, like stink on ugly. I finally took it down because I just got sick of it, because those people and me, the people who follow Quentin Lucas, we're never going to see eye to eye if our noses were touching. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So, I don't need to
and
see
Facebook, breeds that kind of
hate
behavior too. I mean, people, I've had it myself, as we've talked about, people are going to say all kinds of nasty shit to you on Facebook that they would never say to your face. People who don't even know you. And so, I mean, I think you were right in,
I took it
your
down
outrage.
because it just pissed me off at the point.
It
pissed me off because when I talk to police officers and I say, in Kansas City, I say, what do you think about your mayor? You think he's got your back? And I get an eye roll or a sigh or something like that.
Yeah.
I had Brad Lemon on my show on KFKF, who's the head of the Kansas City FOP, and they deal with this every day. They deal with the Quentin Lucas policies of turnstiling these people who commit crimes, putting them back on the street, and then they blather and blather and blather on about gun control issues, when 99.9% of legal gun owners would never commit a crime with a gun.
Yeah, and the reason that Quentin Lucas got that award from Everytown for gun safety is because he's suing gun manufacturers. And there's a couple things. There was one thing that he did where there was a gun store or something that was making illegal sales or something like that, and he, helped crack down on them and get them held accountable, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's good. But he's taking that and turning it into, well, the gun is the problem. The gun manufacturers are the problem. That's one of these big pushes from the gun control people, is that if there's a mass shooting using a Bushmaster rifle, you should be able to sue Bushmaster for the damage caused by the mass shooting. And it's ridiculous. It's like, should we be able to sue cars when somebody gets killed, run over by a car?
The guy who drove through that parade in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that was a Ford. Ford Escape. Let's sue Ford.
They should sue Ford under that same logic, which is
and so
twisted.
That's why he got this big award. Again, it's all virtue signaling. He hasn't actually done anything about that specific issue. And then on top of that, he's not doing anything about the illegal guns. The letting people out of jail. He's not cracking down on gun crime. So, of course, nothing is going to come of it, but it's just crazy. It's crazy.
Well, okay, so that dust up's going to continue. I took it down, and I said, another day. And he even said, we can fight another day. This is not the time for it. He replied back to me and all that. So, okay, so we'll fight another day, and I'm sure we'll fight on as we continue to promote things like busting criminals, keeping them in jail, enforcing the law, and while he continues to talk about gun control. We need to talk about our sponsors because we haven't done that yet. My good friend Bob Watson at State Farm, he reached out to me, and he did not give me the green light, so I can't give you the name of the family, but he said he wrote another couple of policies based off the podcast.
Oh,
People
great.
who are listening to us, watching us, who want a real live human being who agrees with us, who sees the problems of the country, and will be there for you when you've got an emergency situation, when you've got a car wreck, when you've got a claim on your house, God forbid, a life insurance claim, something like that, commercial insurance, boats. He's licensed in both Kansas and Missouri, writes a lot of business on both. He's at 7th and Main in Blue Springs. He's our guy, Bob Watson, and he's ready to take your call at 816-229-7878. And I'm just going to warn you, because if you watch this podcast, listen to this podcast, you may end up talking to him about politics for about an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Right.
So block that out, but then get your business done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's really good to hear. It's nice when you have those moments. We do this. We're sitting in this room by ourselves.
Right.
We don't have a live audience. No idea who's listening. And so it's nice when you hear that we're making connections. We're helping people out. We're connecting people to to their insurance policy with Bob Watson, and so that's great to hear.
State
Hopefully
Farm.
more. Give them a call.
Surprisingly great rates at State Farm, and you talk to an actual human and a staff of people right in Blue Springs, Missouri, who are ready to help you. The other guy who helps us out a lot with this podcast is Jim Dingman, and of course he runs Funhouse Pizza in Blue Springs and in Lee Summit, 50 Highway in Lee Summit and 7 Highway in Blue Springs. Just a terrific guy, a Marine Corps veteran, who loves this country as much as we do. That's what you get when you get people who want to come, and Jim Dingman and Bob Watson are two guys who said, what can I do to help you with this podcast?
Mm-hmm.
And they are helping us because we're spreading the word through their sponsorship of the podcast. But Jim Dingman's got a great restaurant, got 2 great restaurants. They're giving away prizes all the time. But the best thing about Funhouse Pizza is the pizza. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I talked about this on last week's show, too, while you were out. But he's still posting on his Facebook pages that they're hiring people. So if you know somebody out there, particularly maybe at high school or college age or not, good starting pay, I believe $13 an hour. I could be wrong about that. But it's a great place to work. It's a fun environment. Everyone there is very nice. I've been there a few times. You've been there a few times. We've recorded there. And they support the show. So support them. Go out and get yourself a job.
No doubt about that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you got some kid in your basement playing video games, kick his ass out and tell him to go get a damn job.
Right. And if you do, even if you just go to Funhouse Pizza or to Bob Watson, or whoever, tell them that we sent you, because that helps us out too, and it makes that connection where they know that their message is getting out there and that people are hearing it and responding to it. So we really appreciate it.
I almost turned into the get out of my yard guy. Get out of my yard.
Right.
I wore this shirt on purpose. Okay, and I know that not as many people watch us on YouTube. They should, because we're attractive men.
Yeah.
Me, more middle-aged, you kind of the younger thing. Although I think you need a haircut.
I really do. My wife doesn't want me to, though.
Anyway, I'm wearing my Dream Team shirt, okay, on purpose today. And it's Mount Rushmore, and it's the faces you see on Mount Rushmore with, like, fun sunglasses. One of them's got a headband on. It's all red, white, and blue and sunglasses and all that. I wore it for a reason because we just had an important primary election in both Kansas and Missouri. In fact, the nation was kind of glued to what was going to happen in Kansas. And if you look at some of the faces on here, you see George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and Teddy Roosevelt. Mm-hmm. It's a great cross-section of leaders of this country. And when I think back to the Constitution, which is so important for our podcast, it's what the podcast is based on. Think about this, because I know that you are probably. I'm setting up a scenario.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Because I know that you, being a young guy, are more conservative than I am. I'm older. I've lived through a lot. Okay, and if you go back to the Constitution, you had people on the left. Thomas Jefferson was on the left. James Madison was on the left. John Adams was on the right. You could argue George Washington was on the right. And it took those people coming together in an ugly fashion. Democracy's ugly. Mm-hmm. It's not pristine. It's ugly. People need to get in there, fight, and argue. And the byproduct of that created the Constitution of the United States that we love. Okay? So what happened yesterday was democracy. Okay? And for the first time ever, abortion was on the ballot. And Kansas raised up the urban areas, not so much the rural areas, if you look at the map, and they said that Amendment 2 would not fly. They have in their Constitution a constitutional right to abortion. Now, I don't know where it's going to go from here. I think there's going to be a lot more discussion. There's going to be a lot more things that are going to come down the road. But this is the first time there's been a vote, and overwhelmingly, Kansas said leave abortion in there.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly good that it's left to the states instead of decided by the Supreme Court. We have the opportunity now to have this debate and to have this conversation in all 50 states, which is good, and we should continue to fight for that. But it is unfortunate that the vote came down the way that it did in Kansas. I mean,
here's where I think we're going to end up with this. We're never going to get to where you want to get, and a large number of conservatives want to get, where there's zero abortion for zero reason. We're never going to get there. I think that this is going to expose Kansas that it's the wild, wild west there. So I guess you can go in at 9 months and have an abortion. I don't think that's a good idea. It's going to expose all that. And I think where we're going to get as a rational society is abortion ought to be rare, it ought to be safe, and it ought to be limited at a certain point that we all can kind of live with.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that is, I guess it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about where you think realistically it's going to come down, maybe that's realistically where it's going to come down at some point, or in certain states, in certain areas. But I do think, we have to fight towards a goal. We may never get to that goal. I mean, there's goals in everything. You fight for the perfect and you settle for the good. That's kind of how life works, in general. But the whole issue of abortion, it I think is a little bit different in some ways, because we're talking about a fundamental right to life. You mentioned democracy. I mean, we don't live in a democracy. We live in a representative republic, and there's a reason that we are granted certain things by the Constitution. For example, Kansas can't put up a amendment on the ballot to get rid of the Second Amendment in Kansas. That's not constitutional. It's not allowed. There's a reason for that. It's because our rights are not up to a vote. Our rights are not up to the majority of people to decide what they mean or whether we get to keep them or not.
Okay, and to your point on that, I mean, this may be a test case for the Supreme Court, because Roe versus Wade is not there to back up the constitutional amendment in Kansas.
Right.
Or what's in the Constitution of Kansas.
Right.
So, there may be that. I mean, we make fun of Democrats who they don't get their way with the court. It's not their, extra legislative branch, so they want to change all the rules. So if Kansas gets a Republican governor next time with a Republican legislature, I think it was 6-1 on the Supreme Court to set up that right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe they should appoint 7 more justices
to
their Supreme Court and flip it the other way. I don't think that's the way it'll come down, but I'm just saying if we were going to be Democrats, that's what we would do. That's how they play the game.
Right. No, and I'm not arguing for that, and I'm not saying that the vote that happened yesterday in Kansas was illegitimate or anything like that, or that it should be ignored. I'm just saying that with this issue specifically, we're sort of having a different conversation. We're not talking about what the tax rate should be. We're not talking about whether this thing or that thing should be legal, whether we should increase the speed limit or have medical weed or whatever, that states are doing.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a fundamental right. If you read the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, it's about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Without life, you can't have liberty, you can't have the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
So I think there is something that's much more fundamental about this issue than most other issues that we talk about.
I get your point, but my point is there's a practical side to be considered.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got to get to a practical point where most of this country, we talk about the right track, wrong track, and right now the right track, wrong track says we're 85% on the wrong track.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to get to a point where it's more 50-50, okay, maybe even 60-40, where, the vast middle of the country can kind of live with this, or we're going to tear ourselves apart.
Yeah, for sure. I would hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, I mean, I just think that it's just disappointing. I mean, it's disappointing that the vote came down the way that it is, and not happy about it. But
well, it's not the last.
We'll move forward.
It's
move forward.
It's not the last word on this. I'm just saying it's the first word, and that's why a lot of folks were paying attention.
For sure.
Any surprises to you in the primary elections?
I was very busy last night. I didn't really get a chance to look, and then I had meetings this morning. I saw that Schmidt won the primary for the Senate.
He did, and Brighton's finished third.
Yeah, behind Hartzler, right?
Yeah, with like 18% of the vote.
Which is kind of surprising.
And our guy, who I voted for. I voted for McCluskey.
Me too, and 2%. So did my wife. Yeah.
2%. Maybe we were the only votes the guy got, but I thought he made a lot of sense. But, moving forward, Schmidt's my guy.
Yeah.
The party needs to come together now, because it is very important that we keep that in the Republican column.
Yeah. And, Schmidt's not bad. My criticism of Schmidt was that he seemed to be kind of all talk, no game. Like he was always putting forth these lawsuits and things like that never went anywhere.
Right.
And it seemed like he was doing it just as a campaign strategy. And even like interviewing him at Ray's Cafe, he did seem to kind of have that politician-y sort of like big talk type thing.
Most of them are politicians. That's why we voted for McCloskey, because he came across as not the politician.
Right. And but I will say, I mean, I'm glad it's Schmidt and not Greitens. I would
me too.
much prefer
too much
Schmidt.
heat on Greitens.
too much heat, and he just seems fake to me. He just seems fake to me, and there's something about him
slimy.
that I just don't like.
Every time I hear him talk, it's just slimy. And I heard him on with Stegall, and they were debunking these ads that were run with a voice actress, not even his wife. I mean, how dishonest was all that?
Yeah.
And the fact that he has custody of his kids. So if he was beating his kids, why would he have custody post-divorce? That doesn't make any sense.
I don't know.
So
man.
it's all debunked. But there's so much shit that just swirls around Eric Greitens. He just needs to go away.
Yeah. And I mean, here's the thing. Like, people get personal attacks all the time, right?
They do.
If you're the guy, if you're the nominee, especially if you're effective like Donald Trump, you're going to get personal attacks. They're going to come after your family. They're going to come after your past. They're going to try and dig up some dirt on you and smear you. And I don't really care so much about that. I mean, that's his personal life. If there's something that's like very troubling, then that's a different story. But the reason that I don't like him so much is just more for his political vibe. He doesn't have a very strong track record, conservative track record. He has some things that are good, some things that are not so good. But I just think it's just disappointing to see, and I'm glad it didn't in this case, but largely speaking, big money is still in control in the GOP. And somebody like Mark McCloskey, somebody who is truly conservative, truly, an outsider.
Just wanted to go there and get the job done.
Truly just a guy, just a guy with the right ideas and the right message, and somebody that has proven himself on the national stage with his actions in St. Louis and with his tour in the media and things like that, that people like that still most of the time don't really have a chance. It's sad, because people still, this is something that happens on both sides. People vote instinctually. They vote for what they see first.
The name they know.
They vote for the name they know. They vote for the guy that has the most TV commercials and says, "I'm the real conservative. I'm going to go to Washington and drain the swamp."
Right.
And they don't, they just see that and they vote. And it's sad that that's the way that it is, but that's the way that it always has been, and it's the way that always will be, because people are many people not very smart, unfortunately, and they're manipulable. People can be very easily manipulated.
Right. Well, in our pledge to you on this podcast is that when the Republicans take the majority, and I'm convinced they will, we're going to hold their feet to the fire. You think I've been rough on the Democrats in the last, year and a half since we've been starting this? We've got to turn this country around. And this is a moment in time where we have an opportunity to do that, so we're going to hold their feet to the fire. Let me give you one of the surprises I had. When I went to vote, I have lived in the same house for almost 22 years. It's been in the 6th district with Sam Graves for all of those 22 years until yesterday. I found out that I am in the 4th district. And so I got to vote for my good friend, Mark Alford.
Did he win?
He won.
Right on. Congratulations,
and Mark reached out to me. I reached out to him this morning very early, and he was still awake.
Really?
And he wants to come back on the podcast.
Okay.
So now he's set up for the general election. And, the north side of Blue Springs was split in the redistricting between 4 and 5. Mm-hmm. So some of my neighbors, they were like, how did you get to vote for Mark Alford? Because I'm in the 5th district now. Mm. So they got Cleaver. Cleaver is their guy.
Right.
So Jacob Turk won the Republican nomination again. Your guy got it last time, right?
Yep. Dirk's got it last time. Turk has been just running and
He's
running
the
for that.
sacrificial lamb that the Republicans run out there every time.
Yeah.
But, if we're going to flip that script, I think it's going to take a young black conservative to basically go in there, because it's still a predominantly black district.
In that district specifically.
In that district, even though it now goes into the suburbs, into Lee Summit and also Blue Springs. But you're going to need a young black conservative to go in there to those black families and say, what in the hell has Emmanuel Cleaver done for you?
Yeah, I don't know that it necessarily has to be a black person, but
it would help.
That might help, but at the very least, you have to campaign in those areas. You have to talk to those people, and that's something that I respected a lot about what Ryan Dirks was doing. Is he spent most of his time, he wasn't out in Eastern Jack, in Blue Springs and all the rural areas where people tend to campaign, because those votes are at some point kind of a given. You don't have to convince those people as much. It's the inner city in that district that really needs convincing. And so he did a lot of campaigning in that area, and that's why he got more votes than anyone had ever gotten before in that race against Cleaver. But yeah, Turk, from what I know about him, he seems decent. I voted for him because
he's a veteran. He's a good guy. I know him. He's a good guy.
He's younger,
but he's their sacrificial lamb.
Right.
They run him out there every time,
right,
and he gets creamed by Emmanuel Cleaver, and that's the end of the deal.
Right. Yeah, it's sad, that they keep running the same guy against him, but I wasn't really convinced by the alternatives. I did my research on the other people that were running for the primary. I wasn't really convinced by any of them, so I just, held my nose and voted for Turk, but
well, and sometimes when you take a stand, and I've taken a lot of stands, both in my political life and my on-air life at KFKF, the reason that I'm probably not on the city council, and maybe the reason I'm not the mayor of Blue Springs, is because I've taken some unpopular stands in Blue Springs. I still think to this day, where that dilapidated hotel was at 7 and 70, Charlie's Car Wash came to the table, said we want to build this pristine building. It'll be high-paying jobs for kids. There's a management scale. It's going to return to the community, all kinds of things. It was a great fit for a building that really was condemned and was a hangout for hookers and drug dealers.
Yeah.
Well, they cleaned it, and now it's just a vacant lot. I lost my city council seat because I made a big deal. It was in my district. I thought it made a lot of sense moving forward, and the politicians there, played politics with it, especially the other guy who is also representing the 1st District. I thought he was going to vote yes. He voted no. It turned the whole thing. So that's why I'm not on the city council. I say all that to set this up. There's another unpopular thing that was on the ballot. Have we talked about the internet use tax?
I don't think so.
It's an important deal because when you order something from Amazon, city tax is not taken out of that. Okay? They don't charge city tax unless your city has passed an ordinance that says, we're allowing them to do that. Okay? They have to pass an ordinance. Most towns have. I know Liberty has, Independence has. Beyond that, I'm not really sure, but most of the bigger cities have passed that. The state of Missouri passed it, and you have to, as a municipality, try and pass it. It was on the ballot yesterday. It failed narrowly. That's the second time it's been on the ballot. And what you get is the no tax at any time people. They'll come out and they'll say, no, no, no. There's already too much tax taken out. Okay.
That's me, by the way.
Well, and I was able to convince people, it's like, look at this. Okay, if you go into a store in Blue Springs, you're paying 2.5% sales tax to the city of Blue Springs. If you order it from Amazon, you're not. Okay, here's the curve. More people are ordering online, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
Than going to brick and mortar.
Yeah.
Okay, the cost of paving roads is going through the roof like everything else is. Okay, yet those people are sliding on city taxes. This time around when the city put it on the ballot, they tied it to roads. They said, we'll take all the money we generate from internet sales, 2.5%, Kurt.
Yeah.
$2.50 per 100 that you spend on Amazon would go back to the city. They'd use it for roads. Okay. And
so is the tax taken out anyways, like after the fact, or is it just you don't pay tax on it?
You don't pay that tax on it.
Okay.
The
gotcha.
state gets their bite of the apple. For the city to get their bite of the apple, they have to pass this, and it's really wonky language on the ballot.
Right.
But it's the way the state did it, and that's the way you have to pass it.
Right.
Other municipalities have managed to pass it. Blue Springs has now failed twice. And here's the reason I say all of that. There were 3 of us in Blue Springs who are not in any government role pushing this thing and answering questions. The mayor had 0 leadership on this. No one from the city council came out publicly on this. There was no leadership on this because they didn't want to put their ass on the line for something that was unpopular. And it failed, and now they're going to have to figure out how to pave roads with less money as more and more people buy online and stop shopping at the brick and mortar, and that's the conundrum that they're going to be in. They got to figure out how to do it. They're not the federal government. They can't print their own money. They got to balance their budget every year, and they got to figure out how to do it because there was no leadership from City Hall.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you make a good case for it, but I think it would just depend on the specifics of the location and, how transparently the money would be going to what they're saying it's going to and not other things.
Well, the first time they tried to pass it, I was on the city council then, and it failed. and it was just going to be money that was going to go to the general fund.
Right.
Okay. The cities are not frivolously spending money. It's transparent. The budget is on the website. You can see where money comes from, where money goes.
Right.
They're not having parties. I know for a fact city council members and the mayor are not making a lot of money for doing that. It's more like allowance that you got when you were a kid at home. I mean, it's more of a stipend than it is any kind of a salary. So nobody's making a lot of money on this. They're just trying to balance the books. And the fact of the matter is the cost for paving roads is astronomical. Everything is going up.
Yeah.
And fewer dollars are coming into City Hall because more money is being spent online, and there's a gap. And this would have filled that gap. They got to figure out another way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you make a great point that, cities tend to be more transparent with their budgets, and that's something that voters need to do their due diligence and look into, myself included. I put myself in that category where I don't feel like I do enough research, especially in like the primaries, leading up to these votes on X tax, Y tax, and how it's going to affect the budget, what it's going to, things like that. I mean, people can be very more, thorough with looking into that. Again, myself included.
Well, and some of the people who said, no more taxes, blah, 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 I was able to turn around on Facebook. And I know the other two people in town who were pushing this as well, they were able to turn them around. But with no leadership from the mayor or anyone on the city council to say, hey, here's the deal. This is why we need this. This is why it's important. That's why it passed in Independence. It's why it passed in Liberty. And it's why it's failed twice in Blue Springs. And I know Bob Watson is listening to this podcast, and he needs to raise hell down there at City Hall, because I raise hell all the time. They don't even listen to me anymore at City Hall. But they'll listen to you, Bob. They really will. So I don't know if this is ever going to come up for another vote again, but Amazon, drives their trucks up and down streets, creating potholes, and now we've got to figure out a way to fill them in Blue Springs because the people who are buying stuff from Amazon aren't paying a measly 2.5% city tax.
Well,
I'm
there you
pissed
go.
about that.
I can tell.
I'm pissed about the lack of leadership.
Yeah.
They are so ineffective right now. And, what it takes is leadership, and we don't have leadership right now.
Well, I think this is very interesting. We kind of went off on a tangent with that, but you're going to find, if you're listening or watching this, you're going to find very few podcasts where people actually talk about local issues like we're talking about right now. I think it's very important. And,
it's not just a Blue Springs issue. I want to make this clear.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's an issue everywhere. Because everywhere, especially with the pandemic, more and more people are getting stuff through Amazon. I buy a lot of stuff through Amazon. Do you?
Yeah.
Okay. And so if there's not a mechanism to pay whatever the tax is, the city rate that you would pay if you went into a brick and mortar store, you're hurting your city. And these are the cities that need to send police to you when you need them, need to fill potholes. I get on Quentin Lucas all the time. I think that the number one and number two jobs of a mayor of a city are public safety and infrastructure. Okay? You got to make sure people are safe. Do you feel safe in Westport?
During the day, sort of.
All right.
At night, no.
At 3 o'clock in the morning when I get here, not so much.
Yeah.
And then infrastructure. You've got to have an infrastructure, or you can't build anything. You can't build an economy.
Right.
Okay. And we managed to get in Blue Springs a dedicated public safety tax in place. We managed to get a dedicated parks tax in place, which I ran. And they can't get this third thing done, and it's going to create a hole in the budget. And wherever you're listening to the podcast right now, your city is going through the same thing if they have not passed this ordinance.
I'm wondering why it doesn't apply across the board in the first place. Like, why does the sales tax for the city and for the state and for the whatever federal tax or what have you, why does that not just apply across the board wherever, regardless of the point of purchase? Like, why is there a separate?
Well, we're big believers in federalism. There's 50 different, laboratories out there, and the laboratory that is Missouri says that, the only way that we can get this done is for each individual municipality to pass this law. So
the state of Missouri has separated out the physical brick and mortar
Yeah.
sales tax and the internet sales
Right.
tax, but not every state has done that.
I don't think. Well, I don't know the state laws in every state.
Right.
But, your state
I mean, it's safe
may
to
vary.
assume that probably not every state
Yeah.
has done that.
But it's
different.
if you're listening in South Carolina, Rick Rainey, you might want to go check that out. But I know what it is in Missouri, and I know how it's affecting Blue Springs,
Right.
And that really bothers me. And I know it bothers Bob Watson. if he didn't know about it, he knows about it now.
Right.
So I'm ready for Bob Watson, my favorite State Farm agent, to go down there and raise hell.
Yeah.
Ready to wrap this thing because I have a way to wrap it.
All right, let's do it.
We always do a little funny story at the end.
Did we miss anything else with the election?
I don't think so. I mean, the table's set for the midterm. I mean, I can't remember the guy in Kansas who got the Republican nomination. The Attorney General in
Kobach?
No. Kobach won his race, though. So it's, will Laura Kelly get a second term in Missouri or in Kansas? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
And, the fifth is probably going to go to Cleaver because it will.
Yeah.
I think Mark Alford's going to win in the fourth
Mm-hmm.
because that's a Republican stronghold.
Yeah.
And I've already asked him for a congressional tour since he's now my congressman.
Right.
So we'll get that
That
set
would be
up.
cool. We could do a Dale Carter's America from Washington, D.C.
Co-hosted by me and Mark Alford.
Yeah.
How about that? That
And
might be fun.
so what? Am I not invited? I'll stay home and.
Well, you can run the camera.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
And yell questions from behind the camera or whatever. Yeah. So it'll be interesting. We'll track it, but I still feel really good about a red wave coming in the midterm. So do you remember when the Royals went to Toronto to play the Blue Jays, and like 10 players couldn't go because Canada has a vaccination policy for COVID?
Yep.
You got to have your vaccinations or you can't go. So 10 players on the team, including Whit Merrifield, the second baseman, could not go. It broke Whit Merrifield's string of like 156 some odd games or something like that. Maybe it's a bigger number than that, but he had a long streak of playing. Well, he didn't go. And he was always a candidate to be traded at the trade deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? He was traded yesterday at the deadline. I mean, he was in the lineup to play in the game last night against the White Sox up in Chicago, and they pulled him out and they said, "You've been traded at the deadline."
Mm.
He was traded to Toronto.
That's hilarious. I didn't realize that.
So Two-Hit Wit is his nickname because, in many games he got like 2 hits. So he became Two-Hit Wit. So I got a couple of names for him on the way out. We could either call him Two-Jab Wit.
So he has to get the vaccine now,
Oh,
right?
yeah. If he's going to play to where he's been traded, he's got to get both of the vaccines. So it could either be Two-Jab Wit, but I like this one better. Two-Prick Wit. And on that note, we have a special version of the podcast coming out next week. John Rich with Big and Rich has a song out. It is the #1 all-genre downloaded song, okay? It's called Progress, quote-unquote progress, right? #1 most downloaded for 12 days in a row at this point, okay? More than Beyonce, more than anybody else. Most downloaded. How many country stations in America do you think are playing this country record called Progress by John Rich?
Well, we just talked about this before the show, so I'm going to guess 2.
There are 2. WQYK in Tampa Bay and KFKF in Kansas City.
Right on.
The rest of Nashville, the woke Nashville environment, and this is really sad because country music has a long tradition of songs about social consciousness, about what we're going through right now. Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard, Johnny Paycheck, me and the IRS, Johnny Paycheck, take this job and shove it, Johnny Paycheck. Charlie Daniels had a bunch of songs about America and what he believed and what he loved. Toby Keith is another one. Mm-hmm. And now this in a long line. We had the Aaron Lewis song, remember that?
Yeah.
We played Am I the Only One?
Yep.
This is the next version of Am I the Only One? Okay? It's called Progress. We're going to play it next week, but you can find it well before then, and you'll hear my interview with John Rich, who reached out to me. I saw it online, and I went, oh, my God, that fits exactly what we're doing. And I listened to it, and it's like, okay, we're going to play that on KFKF. He reached out to me. He said, can I come on your show? So you're going to hear the product of that next week.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Until then, This is Dale Carter's America.
The views expressed on Dale Carter's America are Dale's and Kurt Wheeler's. They do not necessarily reflect the views of KFKF or Steel City Media. Comments can be sent to dalecartersamerica@gmail.com. Check back for weekly episodes. Subscribe, spread the word, and give us a 5-star review. Thanks for being a part of Dale Carter's America.